everyone to another Open Signal Labs Presents. Today we have, as usual, an amazing guest to speak with us about a very exciting element of cinema production and television and media. Just real quick to people who may not know a little bit about Open Signal Labs. Open Signal Labs is a program developed from Open Signal, a community arts organization here in Portland, Oregon. Our focus at Open Signal Labs is to support Black creative people in the areas of film and television and cinema in general, but also to support Black people in broad forms of creative expression with those touch points to cinema and television. We've been around for about 2.5 years now. Our first large initiative was the Black Filmmaker Fellowship, which is in its second year, COVID willing, where we have 6 fellows who come from Portland who are interested in or are in some level associated with film and television production. We bring them in to help support their own individual ideas and also work on a number of different projects throughout the year that are associated with sort of Black creativity here in Portland. The idea of Open Signal Labs is to create pathways into the industry, not just locally, but nationally and internationally, which is why we're incredibly excited to connect with people like Veniesa, who is an incredible visual effects and makeup artist who is based in Los Angeles. So we'll be speaking with her a little bit about her experience, where she is currently, what she's working on, and she's going to give us a little bit of insight into her creative process and just the structure of visual effects in general. A little bit about Veniesa. She is, I believe, a native Iowan. And I don't know very many people from Iowa, but I assume that it is a place where, as a woman of color, she has stood out in one way or another. But she's always been excited. I think in her bio, she talks a lot about Men in Black being a really transformative part of her life and sort of sparking her interest in creative makeup effects. She moved to Los Angeles, I think she said about 2 years ago, after she graduated from a university in Iowa studying film, cinema, and television and fine arts. I think that's a good approximation. But since being in Los Angeles, she's worked on a number of different projects that take advantage of her amazing skills. Incredible. We haven't had an opportunity to really talk with makeup artists. We talked at Open Signal Labs Presents with a lot of cinematographers, writers, directors, and producers, but never someone who is so sort of hands-on in their creative craft in a very literal sense. So I'm very excited that she's here to talk to us about what it is that she does. So without further ado, Vanessa Dillon.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I am a native Iowan, and I was like one of 3 Black people in Iowa City. So yeah, you were actually correct about that. So when I moved out here, I had immediately went to cinema makeup school to really get a firm education on special effects. Because although like I always wanted to be an effects artist, I always practiced, I always tried, my best to make maquettes and do things on my own. It was really difficult to really grasp the concepts around it. And so I always grew up mainly just then focusing my time on drawing and how do I come up with the characters or creatures that really stand out. And so now what I bring to the table now is that now that I've understood and I know how special effects works and how to be on set as well as in the shop creating these things and these prosthetics, I even now like to bring in why these designs look the way they do. What's important to consider is that the writing is just as important as the concept design. I cannot design something if the writing isn't as good or if the director isn't that good. So as long as everyone else is passionate in the crew, I'm just as passionate, and I like to match that.
Awesome. So I want to go back a little bit to that Men in Black moment, and talk about the moment when you realize that this is something that you identify with that's exciting to you, but then there's also the moment where it's like, hey, I could do this for a living. Can you take us through that process where it became like, hey, this is cool, and it's like, oh, this is what I want to do forever? When was that moment and what was that like?
It's like, you know, when you're really young and you kind of remember some things and your thought processes and things that just stuck with you. I was way too young. Like, I imagine myself as being 7, 8, but actually I was 3. My mom was always saying, like, I was too young to know my alphabet, really. You know, I was still like in daycare, and my mom's a daycare provider. And so I brought that up to say that I remember I was so into Men in Black as such a young kid that even when I was learning my ABCs, my mom had little like little styrofoam letters, and I turned the L sideways and I made it a gun. And I said, that looks like a gun. And she just cracked up laughing. It was probably those really early on moments to where I don't remember a point in my life where I didn't want to create creatures and monsters. I think there was multiple moments in my life where it really was a big impact on what led me here, but I like to stick to the Men in Black one because it was a happy memory. It made me wonder, as a curious child, like, how does that exist and why? And it really was the first step into discovering it.
Yeah, it's amazing at such a young age. I mean, I have a 11-year-old who is just now starting to understand the world that cinema creates. Like, and there's always this like suspension of disbelief. That's like the core of cinema, and especially in fantasy and fiction. But she's always asking me, you know, is that real? You know, there's this like, even at like 11 years old, she's like, are they really flying through the air? Because these days, like, these effects are so convincing. But to be able to sort of parse that at such an early age is, I would imagine, is a tremendous, I don't want to say asset, or advantage, because it's not really a competition, but I think that it would have a significant impact on your ability to operate within that space, to really like, you know, function. Like at 3 years old, if you understand like things can be something else, it's a really amazing sort of psychological, intellectual transition, philosophical transition for a young child to make. So that's pretty incredible. So at this point, I mean, were your family and friends, were they sort of supportive of this? Were they always trying to, did they recognize this talent and support it going forward? Or was it something that you had to kind of like fight for and make sure that was a part of your educational experience or a part of your world?
For me, it was 100% supportive by my entire family. Like, because I started from so early, that it also helped because I was scared of everything as a kid. I know it's crazy to imagine that somebody who does a horror and gore and creates monsters. I was such a scaredy cat as a child. I was scared of everything, the wind blowing. I was always crying. I'm the youngest also with 3. So I was, you know, very spoiled and being like, mommy. But eventually I remember my, you know, getting over that fear was probably when I always liked to draw. And sometimes I started drawing monsters that I thought I saw in my closet, or monsters that I had nightmares with. And it just made it not real. Well, it made it seem like it wasn't real anymore. And I felt like I just trapped that fear on the page. And it never bothered me again after I started doing that. I don't really do that anymore because I'm, you know, and now it's actually like work or me practicing. But I did that for so long that I came up with so many different types of creatures and designs that it's almost limitless, the things that I like to draw and why. And now I just focus on why it looks that way and why it's important. But my parents have always known that I want to be an effects artist because I was always drawing monsters. And for a little while, my mom would be like, why don't you draw roses or something else? Because I was a little girl. And all the other little girls were drawing unicorns and rainbows. And I drew like a monster. You know, I drew something crazy, you know, a dragon. But, you know, it was only one time where she brought that up out of curiosity. But, you know, it was just is what it is. And my sisters always supported me. My friends growing up, I would force them to draw with me. Like my friend who I grew up with, I'm really close with her. So they always knew. And then I think it was just a pretty easy transition, especially when I just paved my way. Everyone, I think, likes to understand that their kid knows what steps they want to do. I want to apprentice. Wait, I want to go to effects school. I want to, you know, and I'm always trying. So I think they were just happy to see that instead of partying, I was like staying in and trying to figure out my next, you know, thing I want to perfect drawing.
So in college, I'm always interested in kind of like, I mean, I imagine this world of prosthetic and practical visual effects as being so connected to the traditional disciplines of fine arts like sculpting and painting and drawing. Was there a course or a sort of direct pathway at your educational institution to steer you towards this sort of convergence of, fine art and then cinema and then sort of this creative space? Was there a major that led you towards training and developing your skills?
When I went to the University of Iowa, I think it really solidified me understanding color theory and understanding like how to paint, why paint this way. I don't really paint too much, but it did help a lot. I would practice painting because color was hard for me. I actually never then paid attention to learning beauty makeup. I actually had the opposite. A lot of my things strayed an opposite way when I could have been going this way, but it was my own ambition that forced some of these elements into and drag them over. So I never really paid attention to beauty makeup and learning how to do my own like makeup, which would have helped so much actually. I didn't even consider how much it would help because now I'm completely lost sometimes thinking about translating it over to it being on a human being, it being on a person, if they're comfortable and the colors that work with different things and making something beautiful. And then so for that, and then with drawing, a lot of times when I was at the University of Iowa, they were really mad that I would draw monsters. I had zero support from any art professors, and especially some of my own students and my peers and stuff. They did not think that it was real art. I remember doing a presentation in an art class about special effects, and I was talking about Norman Cabrera and his sculpting and different things, and they were like, "That's not art." They interrupted my whole presentation, like in class. They said, "That is not art." And I was like, how is it not art? It's everything we do wrapped up into one. It's literally all of that. So I just fought for it. I played their little game, tried to do the pretty art a little bit, tried to sneak in a few monsters here and there and make up that it was symbolic, but lying. And then after I graduated there, I was like, okay, I got what I need, because my parents really wanted me to go to a formal college first. Got what I needed, and I was like, all right, it's time for cinema makeup school, my dream school. Let's really get it started.
All right. I have a question. When you were going through the experience of them saying it's not art, do you feel like any of that, is tied to your race, your Blackness, or do you just feel like because of what type of art you were pursuing in that context, people thought of it as not art?
Oh man, it could be all over the place. I think it's both, and I'm gonna try and like make it a short answer, but definitely with being in fine arts, they always like to, especially on a college campus that was a predominantly white institution, being a Black woman in that class and one of like maybe one of like two, they always wanted to understand the Black perspective, but kind of in a wrong way. Like it was almost too much. I am 100% Black, and I love being a Black woman, and I love to represent it in different ways, but they always only want to see like, oh, but as a Black woman, and just force upon absolutely everything I do, to where my entire identity, things that I like, was just because I was a Black woman. It wasn't because I was anything more. It was just that. And that's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a part of me and a big part of me, but it's not the only part of me. And so sometimes they would always go back into, I would draw a monster and they'd force upon, it means racism. And I'd be like, well, this one is mainly about misogyny, and this one's mainly about something else. But I mean, and sometimes I just let them think that. But I do think that way. And also I think that cinema and special effects, monsters, anything fun and just exciting that could get people really excited, I feel like it's looked down upon in the more prestigious community like the fine arts. The fine arts has its own crazy politics I don't want to get into, but they definitely do not like it, even though effects incorporates every single major fine arts form into one. I don't know what the deal is.
Well, I mean, elitism, in sort of, our sort of colonialist mindset, control, all those things factor in. I want to make sure you have a presentation that you want to share that I want to make sure to leave time for. Maybe we can take some time to set that up now, and you can take us through what you specifically want to share. And as we go through, if people have questions, maybe hold those for a few minutes, or if you want to type them in the chat, if you feel free to do that if you think you're going to forget. But I think I definitely want to make sure that we get a chance to see all of what Veniesa has prepared. So I think.
Just a second, we're almost there.
No problem.
All right, can you guys see all right?
Yes.
All right. So this presentation is mainly about so people understand what goes all into special effects and what it is, how it works, and when to use it. So what is it? Special effects makeup is the use of silicone or foam latex prosthetics to manipulate the eye or change the structure of a person to look different, such as that it's always an actual actor, and the prosthetics that go upon them can make them turn into things like Predator, a xenomorph from the movie Alien, or sometimes a lot of the aliens that were used in Men in Black. Another way it is used is in character makeup, which I don't have too much examples of because those are mainly things that are used on sets. And that can be something like Pirates of the Caribbean that the amazing makeup artist V. Neal had worked on, turning people into pirates and not really using too many effects, but to really create the illusion that these characters and these actors actually live in this environment and this world that the movie has built. So for the entire creative process, the first thing you want to do is come up with your monster, your creature, or the effect that you want to create. So when I say the effect you want to create, that is different than just makeup special effects. So it could be things like animatronics, where it's a robot and it could look like it could be a lion or anything, and we make it look real. We built the entire thing. Or it could be a gag, or gag effects with like a blood splatter, someone's throat getting slit, or in the Saw movies they use a lot of like giant dummies essentially made out of silicone. Someone's arm gets ripped off, things like that. Which is basically props. So we wanted to come up with the design. And so it's called the concept design, and there's 3 different methods that are really useful: the 2D drawing method, 3D digital sculpts, and maquettes. We like to use scripts a lot to understand what this character could represent. Let's say that something is supposed to represent racism. I would suggest sometimes being a horror expert and you're known as being like the monster. You should be a monster expert getting into this film. You should understand the difference between cryptids and folklore, mythologies, and how each creature or monster should be used correctly. So someone were to say in a movie, for example, I want to represent racism as a creature or as a monster. My first thing I would say would be, let's make it racism a ghost story. If we're going to have it a monster, this is just an example. Why use ghost? It would be because not everybody sees it. Only a certain few only understand its concept. A lot of other people who are skeptical of it will say, no, it doesn't exist, such as just like with a ghost. And there's omens that we could use. For example, like we'd say the stench of forbidden fruit, maybe. Things like that, something to make sure that creature means something. Every creature means something, no matter what. Godzilla represented the nuclear bomb of Hiroshima. King Kong actually was a racist representation of the fear white people had and if we freed Black people. So all these things are very important. Never make a monster just absentmindedly. So that's why I would use a world Bible. Design has to be symbolic and feel realistic and can be used in pitches, proof of concepts. And I will go over that later on. Sometimes it's really hard and scary to get started in science fiction and fantasy movies because all the budget is essentially going to special effects and to create aliens and these characters in this environment. A lot of times I work with people to create pitches, such as I did with this maquette right here. I had this thing 3D printed, and I could give it to the producer. He has a few statues made of this. We had, concept designs and drawings and stuff. And when he's pitching it, it makes producers really excited to see what can be made. Oh, this could actually exist. And so I work a lot of times to get people funding, and then they later on they can bring me on the sets to get that. I could turn, basically I'm like a money flipper, where you give me like maybe 1,000, I could turn it into like 50,000 for our budget for the movie. The second thing I'm going to talk about is building prosthetics, like life casting, sculpting, mold making, casting, and painting, and applying, so that everybody understands how and when you can use these methods, what to ask for with your effects artist. So one of the first examples is a maquette. A maquette is basically a miniature sculpture. It really helps the special effects artists get a feel for how they will sculpt the final design. I really like this method, but the pros and cons of this, the pro is that I get to understand how I'm going to sculpt this. You know, what armatures am I going to use? Should I life cast this? How would it fit on a person? But the con is that sometimes, you know, it takes a long time. As you can see with this thing, it has actually a stand on it. And so I just sculpted from the torso up because it takes so long to do. And a lot of people just don't like to wait for them. Another method is to 3D digitally sculpt designs. This is one of my favorite methods. It's very fast, it's very efficient. You can have them 3D printed, which is what I did with this, that I had just showed for a pitch. Whenever somebody doesn't like a design, it's easier to go back and say, okay, let me change that, let me do that, because it's all digital. And so it's very useful. You can pose the entire thing however you like. You can do almost anything digitally. The only con is that it can get pricey. We can start with, depending on what it is, I think prices usually start at like $300 to $500. But my revisions, I cut the cost lower because it's so easy to do. And then another example is that this is my bread and butter and the thing that really got me started in effects, 2D sketching. It's the most artistic and dramatic version of like concept designing. It takes a long time, which is kind of a con, but the design may not always come out exactly the same this way because I am an artist. The shading I'm doing is just out of my own mind. It doesn't actually exist in an environment or the world. So I pose them beautifully, it looks great, and I kind of overcompensate for the things it can't do, with it taking a long time to do revisions because I have to start all over with a drawing. But it does look pretty. And sometimes when people do pitches, sometimes they want to do a whole painting, a formally traditional sort of painting, or sometimes a lot of the producers and directors want a keepsake. You can look at Guillermo del Toro, his whole home became an art gallery so big, full of these sorts of concept designs and maquettes, that he made a literal art show. And so here's some more examples just to prove how dramatic these things can be, because usually with concept designs, they're going to be flat and posed in a T stance so that we can see the whole thing. But in a drawing, I can do that too. But most of the time, people want to see them more elaborate. They want to see all the detail, the beauty in it, the meaning. And it just works really well sometimes in pitches if you're really after an aesthetic over the purpose of it. So with building the prosthetics, I'm just going to briefly talk about the different methods it goes and all the hard work it goes into building these things. 100% everything that I make from scratch. That means the silicone, the foam, everything requires formulas, chemicals, and a deep understanding of how to make these things. They say special effects artists are actual artists. We're construction workers, we're chemists, and we're scientists because we're always studying new theories and methods. And we're like mathletes because we always have to decide, you know, how much 1-to-1 ratio of this chemical to that. So it's a lot of work, and this goes into understanding why it can be expensive. So one of the first methods to do, we have an actor. This is the guy we for sure want to go with, right? So we're gonna life cast him. I always want to make custom made prosthetics. A lot of effects artists do. And so in order to do that, we have to get an exact copy of the actor's face. So you pour something called like a body double, which is a silicone, or what is known as like an alginate. You pour it all over their face and body. We prep the hair, make sure it's covered, make sure everything is good. We make sure that the nose is the only thing they can breathe out of. In this process, they have to remain completely still, whether I'm life casting their entire body or just their face or their hands. We can life cast any part of them that we're going to be sculpting off of. Once that alginate is on, and sometimes, or body double, I put on more layers and make sure they can still breathe. They even stop hearing at some points. It's hard to hear. They can't see. Their eyes are closed, and sometimes their mouths have to be shaped open, or like.
I don't know if I can make it through that.
A lot of people actually are terrified of this method. This actor, and then after that, you think that's bad. Then we put almost a hydrocal on top of it, which is almost like a concrete, so that the body double doesn't shift. So we do 2 parts if it's the whole head, or just one frontal part, and it gets heavy. When it starts to cure, it starts to do this thing called hydrothermic, in which the heat starts to build up, and I have to touch on it and just slap my hand kind of on it and feel when it's going to be ready to then take off the actor. Whole time they can't move, see, hear, or talk. So it's pretty intense. But here's some examples of some people getting life casted that I've done. That's my partner and my friend Lena, who also does special effects. And with this method, this is an old school tactic. And so nowadays, this can be done, and it can be done for, depending ranging price, I'd say like maybe $500 or something. I would personally, if it's a new actor. Sometimes if I have the life cast, I have the life cast forever, right? So then I could, when you want to bring that actor out again, I already have it. And I'll show you an example of that. And once I have a life cast, I usually always push that actor. So actors, find an effects artist to life cast you, and they're going to get you work all the time. I do it all the time. We need a big guy. I got a big guy, and it cuts budget too. So, but now the new method is basically sometimes people stand in a room and a bunch of cameras take pictures of them at once, and they can 3D scan a life cast. So once the life cast is done, it becomes the sculpting process. So for these 2 that I've done, it's actually on the same actor, this big guy I really like. And so I just wanted to do the face because I didn't have to do the rest of his body. These characters were going to be big already. He works out, he's already big. Hey, that cuts cost, his body's already perfect for what I want and what my vision requires. And so I just have to work on changing his face. And I change his face all the time, even though he's a very handsome man. He always winds up a monster when I get my hands on him. So on the left, I have an Anansi the spider sculpt, where it was an ode to some of the folklores and things that, inspire me and things that I grew up listening to and relate to. I definitely wanted to do something that was centered around creating Black people as gods and as, beautiful characters and their own narratives. Because as I say, as much as I do special effects and wound makeup and blood and gore, I sometimes refuse to put bullet wounds and stab marks on Black men, because I said I'm sick of seeing Black men with bullet holes. So you hire me, just understand that I kind of refuse killing Black men. I think that that's enough. I always like to turn them into gods or creatures or something powerful. On the right is an alien sculpt I did for a proof of concept. And he just paid me, just wanted the face done. And then I took photos and I sent them, and he lived in the United Kingdom. So it doesn't matter sometimes where you're from, as long as I have an actor. Oh, hold on. Okay, and sometimes the sculpting process can be done flat. This is just, a brief of saying, sometimes if it's wounds or whatever, I'll sculpt it flat and I don't need to life cast them. I'll just make silicone prosthetics out of what I've already sculpted. So for molding the sculpt, this is the hard work, and my mold right there is not pretty. That was one of my first hydrocal molds, and usually they want them really smooth and looking really good, and I'm getting a lot better from it. This is a very old school method that I'm showing right now. That's with hydrocal or ultracal, and once the sculpt is made onto the life cast, on the opposite end, we have the life cast. I can show examples of this later when you have questions, because it's a lot. And then we have the sculpt. I then mold on top of that, so it takes an imprint of whatever I sculpted. And on the back end, I have his face. So once I open that mold, I clean out all the clay, and I have the negative print of what I sculpted and his face as a positive. So when I put foam in there, I clash them together, and the foam molds into what I had already sculpted. And that is basically, and here's some other examples. On the left is a process used for when I did a silicone bust of my decapitated head. This is my own head right here. And that process that's called a 2-part mold. And on the right, I was sculpting the runoff so that my mold could stay in place. And so for casting, that is when you put either foam latex or silicone inside the mold to fill it out. This is the actual prosthetic. This requires the chemistry part a lot of times and the construction worker part. It's foam latex, you're a construction worker. You're making concrete and, or I'm sorry, if you foam latex, that's actually the molding process, I'm sorry. For foam latex, you're also a chemist. You mix your own foams. We have KitchenAids where we put all the chemicals into, we measure them all out, depends on the temperature, depends on, you know, how long these products have been sitting out, that all goes into it. And I'm backspinning and spinning this KitchenAid, creating foam that I will then pour into the mold. And then when I bake it, because foam latex has to be baked, and that's something that's very important I want to point out. Foam latex is cheaper, but it takes longer, in my opinion.
So what are we looking at here? What is this?
Right here is silicone.
This raw.
So here is the mold. It looks phallic. This is actually a scar. But this is a scar.
I see.
And so this is the actual mold. And see, it's like flexible. This because it's made out of silicone. When I put silicone in here, that's also a huge chemistry part of it. I dump it in there and then I squeegee kind of out excess, and that's kind of, and I fill this in for flashing so that when I apply it, it's easier. And I can talk about that later because I don't want to keep boring people with all.
No, this is not boring. It's the opposite.
Okay. On the left side, this is for, you know, producers, directors, and anything. Here we kind of have a comparison. On the left, when you see the board on there and my name kind of written on there, that is foam latex. I had just poured the foam latex into the mold. Put in the life cast, and you see the handlebar in the back. That's the actual life cast, which is of the actor's face. Switch that in there so it prints to the actor's face so it can conform perfectly to how they want it fit. And then I take 2 boards and I take this rope, basically called a mold rope or whatever, and I tighten it real tight, and then I put it in the oven. Once it's in the oven, though, I cannot use my own oven ever. I cannot use anybody's actual kitchen oven because it's highly toxic and it will make your oven ruined forever unless you want to taste foam in all your food for the rest of your life. And then on the right, silicone is very fast. I have the silicone mold, that one in the photo right here. And I just pour the silicone in there, just put some rubber bands to make sure it's tight. That's it. Silicone can set sometimes within a day and it's done.
So what are these molds? What the one on the right? That you just held? What is that a mold of? That is a heart, and that is the okay.
photo. I will show you how the heart turned out looking. Okay. On the left, that was the things that I sculpted. So here's the heart when it turned out. Silicone is very nice. It looks really good. So for painting, the differences between painting foam latex and silicone. It's very different. It's not even like regular painting. If you even hear of an effects artist saying they're in the process of painting, you really need to understand that they need some time to do this. A lot of people are really fast. I like to work pretty fast, but it does take some practice. So for foam latex, I think it's a lot easier personally. You use something you have to seal the foam as soon as it comes out. So because and you pre-paint it. So all of these, right, what you're looking at are half painted. And that is because once I needed to seal the foam latex so that when I put it on them, I then paint the rest. You cannot paint the edges of foam latex so that it can blend in the skin easier. So to make sure that the foam latex is protected, you mix Prosthetics with acrylic paints and you mix the two, and then you can just go in and just hand paint, or sometimes you can thin out and airbrush it. Silicone painting is a lot. It is very extreme. If you hired someone to do silicone, just back up for a little while. Do not, they're saying they're painting something for you. Just wait. They will message you back when it is done. Because I say that because silicone is tricky. Silicone only wants to stick to silicone. So how do you paint it? You have to then mix up the chemicals of silicone and somehow combine it with a paint that can adhere to it. So we use something like oil paints. So you take a caulking silicone, you mix that, or everything I'm saying is also just half steps, because this isn't just everything special effects, just understand. So for one method, you take the caulking silicone, you take your oil paints, you mix the two, but you have to dissolve the silicone enough to where it can blend the molecules with the paint. So you take a solvent like, not always lighter fluid is cheap, but something like naphtha or something. And you thin it down to where you can actually paint it, and you lightly brush it. And to make skin, if someone is doing skin, they have to paint very lightly a wash of blues, purples, greens, yellows, then some browns, because our skin is so complicated. But silicone looks the best. It's closest to skin. And as you see, I really had a fun time painting that. But again, it's a long process. It even requires respirators. Like, it's very intense, but it's a lot of fun. The last step is to apply or to finish something. That's when you're actually putting the prosthetics or bringing out the props, like on a set. This all was just on sets. And this is when we finally put things on. So it looks kind of silly right now, but on the left and the right is actually both of the foam latex pieces you saw I had sculpted before. On the right, I cut one in half and made two separate molds so that it's easier. The foam latex is really light. It's very comfortable, and this actor moves pretty well in this foam latex. I have to blend the edges. I have to base out his skin tone, especially if they're deeper skin tones and stuff. Just know that no matter what, you work on all skin tones. If any effects artist tells you, oh, can we cast somebody lighter skinned because this creature is lighter? Or you hear anything that makes it seem like they want to cut out somebody for having darker skin, you fire that special effects artist. Because a special effects artist is an artist, not a black special effects artist, not a white special effects artist. You're just an effects artist. And if they can mix different chemical combinations to come up with foam, then of course they can paint over somebody who's black. And I just want to be very clear on that, because I don't want any black actors missing a role of their dreams because an effects artist or a makeup artist says that they can't work on them. That is not a real thing. And so just to kind of wrap this presentation up, my favorite guy, Rick Baker, who's the creator of the Aliens and Men in Black, and basically every creature, says that there's magic when you have a really good actor and a really good makeup. And I think that can even extend to a really good director, a really good producer, a really good writer, and a really good makeup, because without good writing, directing, that no matter how cool the creature is, it's gonna fail.
Yeah. So
always make sure that those things are all good. And here's just a few of some of my favorite designs, some different works that I've done. Incredible. And then if you ever need to contact me, sometimes it's kind of bizarre that people are going to DMs now. That's the state of it. But I guess hit me up in my DMs. But I will respond with my email address. As you're growing up and you get a portfolio, get a website, everyone just goes to your Instagram. So I have my Instagram link there, and it's fine by me. I'm a millennial. I get it.
Wow, incredible. I know I have like tons of questions, like so many, but I want to. There's a couple of folks on the call who I want to make sure to both recognize, but also encourage to ask questions. Elijah Hassan, who is one of the former pilot year fellows from the Black Film Fellowship, avid filmmaker, very creative guy, very much understands the relationship between art, expression, and storytelling. Just someone to know. I don't know Desmond Jackson. I think I know the name. I feel like we've interacted at some particular point, but if you two would like to introduce yourselves or share what your interests are in context, that could be great too, before we sort of jump into some more questions.
Oh, hi, I'm Elijah Hassan. I think you finally did a good job introducing me. I was just interested in just seeing what you do and how you move and shake. It's rare that I get a peek inside, especially someone, coming as you're coming from. So I appreciate you sharing this intimate look at what you do. I just a little extra. I wrote a screenplay for a zombie flick a few years back, White Zombie, and like you were saying about using a ghost as race, I actually use a virus for racism because it affects the the catalyst I think was water that I use, and if you drink the water, then you start to behave a certain way, and I always looked at racism, or especially white supremacy, as a virus that certain people drank and believe in, then it starts to affect the way they behave, and just like a virus. So I appreciate you saying that, because I realized that after I had wrote it and chose all those things, that they had these symbolic meanings that actually were metaphors for race. And so thank you for that, for validating my choices.
I absolutely love that. And to even solidify it even more, zombies is one of the best things you can use to describe racism. It's literally been used that way. And I think it was Day of the Dead, a George A. Romero film. It literally was supposed to represent that. Even having the black man in this black and white, like old movie and stuff, being one of the last survivors, and he's only killed because white people then shot him. Right. But it's also been used as, and monsters come in cycles for society. It depends, because they all represent different fears in society and humanity. So zombies really popped up when people were afraid of communism, because it spreads and they look like us, but they're not quite like us. Popped up again during, Trump era and stuff. And I'm not getting into politics or anything, but it does have some correlations with that. So that's a really good idea.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
I was thinking about some of the stuff you said as well. We interviewed Xavier Bergen, who's the director of Film Noir, The History of Horror, which was really great. And he also talks about, he just explained his role in the process of that documentary, but that is also something we touched on. And they definitely talk about that in the documentary, on how using that Black actor in Day of the Dead. Wait, did I say that wrong?
Some of the dead movies that
yes, they
Night
definitely.
of the Living Dead.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes, we definitely touched on that and how that all connected and going together. But just listening to the things you talk and then thinking back on our talk with him is just really dope. Both of you all share some of the same perspectives for obvious reasons.
Right.
But I have one quick question.
Before we go, I'm going to give Desmond a chance to share a little bit about who he is and where he's coming from.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much, Veniesa, for this awesome presentation. Really great seeing your world and, giving a little bit of cinema history with the breakdown of, the ghosts and zombies and metaphors and everything. So thank you. I'm actually a filmmaker in LA, pursuing my MFA in directing at Chapman. And I actually have a short film in the festival circuit. It's a horror film. It's called Wolves. And in that film, I think wolves is my, werewolves are my metaphor for like police brutality. And so you're afraid to go out of the house kind of thing. So it's only 5 minutes. But yeah, I'm really invested in the horror genre. And I actually had one question for you, which is, I guess, what is it like? Can you talk more about the dynamic of like working with the director, and like, what do you like to see from the director when they come to present to you? Like, what do they need to have in their Bible or presentation deck when coming to you?
It sounds corny, but the number one thing, you need to be really passionate. If you are a nerd or a dork, all effects artists are. And we want to see that. We don't want to work and do all this hard work for somebody who's going to be like, oh, can you make me a monster? Just be absolutely excited, because it makes us excited. Definitely what you need to bring is things like, if you have a Pinterest, that helps so much. It sounds ridiculous because you usually think middle-aged moms just go on Pinterest. We use Pinterest all the time. You come up with different ideas. Screen, like, any pictures, send us pictures of anything that you like, and say a director or horror movie style and be like, I like this aesthetic. Because, some things can have like different looks. Like, you can definitely tell a creature that's in a Guillermo del Toro movie different from an alien in like the Alien franchise. They look different. They have different types of aesthetics, even though it could be like the same special effects shop doing it, or even being outsourced to help with it. They have a different quality. Another thing is definitely with something with werewolves. My number one thing is I always try my best to be practical and useful, especially around budgets, but also original and as original as possible. And my favorite challenge is things like werewolves or, vampires, things that are so overused. How can we make yours look different? And how is it that when somebody sees your movie, they can say that's his movie, or I've never seen this before. Things going viral is also really big. And my part is visuals. How can somebody see something and either be like, well, what is that? Because sometimes that can capture a lot of people's attention. They see a picture of that type of werewolf or transformation. That can be a big deal. So I'd say think about how we can make werewolves look different or stand out within your budget. And I say consider like talking to your effects artists about werewolves are humanoid and wolf. How can we play with the combination about 50% human werewolf to like more wolf to like on the spectrum? And see how unique that can be, as well as transformations. But the transformations are really pricey. So how can we make a unique transformation? Let's say they turn their head around or something. You do some special cuts to where an effects artist doesn't need to blow their budget on something like that. They turn their head around, they have like another head behind them that is the werewolf, or they flip themselves inside out. And you use special cuts to, limit how we see the transformation. So always talk about those sorts of things and demanding that you want originality, because some effects artists just, they want to get your vision done flat out, and that's really cool. But there's some like me that's like, how can we make yours the coolest version? And that's what makes the movies bigger, like American Werewolf in London, when Rick Baker gets on board and wants to show an actual transformation. Sorry for the rant. Sorry.
No, that was perfect. And I actually wanted to really quickly ask one more thing, is that I guess how do you work or cooperate with like people in VFX? So like say you're doing a transformation and it requires like the prosthetics, but you also like want to have like a little bit of VFX within that. How do y'all like collaborate in that?
Perfect segue.
I love VFX people. There is no hate between CGI and practical. It's just what audience members prefer or anything. I think they save lives. I could create an entire bust or something, and we can mask out the parts that a CGI artist will use to like make the eyes blink, make them smile more or whatever. Like if it's really elongated, effects can only add on, CGI can take off. Always remember that. So if you're concerning which one to use, if something smaller, thinner, things are getting taken away, we can do some illusions. But if you really want to showcase something getting taken away, like let's say somebody's super thin, they're like anorexic now, but the actor obviously is not. That's CGI. Somebody's getting really big, that could be practical.
Yeah. No, I just thought of it recently because we were using the example earlier. We chatted a little bit about WandaVision and that show that exists now. And from what I see that there's a lot of really practical elements of visual effects and CGI that sort of bring elements to that show. But I also thought about the fact that because I'm a firm believer in practical effects first, right? Like if you can get practical effects done, and for one reason is that I think it gives, when you see behind the scenes of CG, you see a bunch of green screens, the actors aren't really engaging with what's physically there. And so I feel like having practical effects give their actors and performers an opportunity to actually see and react to certain things instead of like, a full blue head or green screen or something like that. I feel like that kind of helps in the actor's kind of standpoint. But when talking about WandaVision, you actually revealed some things that I didn't know about, how they were constructing vision. And because what I was looking at was like, they were showing that the entire sort of structure of Vision's, facial visual element, I thought it was all CG, but there were varying different levels of that CG that they deployed. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked?
Oh yeah, I actually haven't gotten a chance to see the show. I've been really busy. But I do know for a fact that they used a lot of practical, especially effects artists can also do things like, okay, let's say there's two different ways that we can look at CGI versus practical, because we're not enemies, we just are used different ways. And depending on if you have to use each of us really right. And if you use us wrong or abuse us, overuse one, then you always get a lot of hate. So yeah, overuse CGI when there could have been practical, you're gonna get a lot of hate, vice versa. So I already said one method where CGI can take away, practical can add. But there's the second method is that practical can build and CGI can add. You know, like, so we are the foundation and CGI can do all the fun stuff and tricks around it. So he actually had practicals around him, but for all the other bells and whistles that say something's glowing or whatever, something gets taken off him, CGI.
You also talked about a little bit about sort of building different pieces of practical makeup and effects to, you know, to be able to withstand the physical rigors of actual performance. Can you talk a little bit about how you build maybe different versions of elements of, you know, either makeup or mask effects to withstand the production process?
So with that question, you're basically asking like, what methods would I use if it's like something's more physical for the actor?
Yeah, how does that work in the filming process?
Oh yeah, oh, that's a good question. So sometimes I like to ask someone, let's say somebody's making a bodysuit. So far I haven't made one, I can, but I'm just waiting on someone to let me. And they're like, okay, we're gonna have this huge creature, right? So they're gonna be fighting, they're gonna be doing a lot of things. A lot of times the people are gonna say foam latex because foam latex is light. I have an example right here. Sorry. It's very, I wish you guys could like feel this. It's very squishy. It's very light. This was a headpiece that went on the top of him for the Anansi sculpt. This is one of the versions. And so it flexes and everything, but it doesn't look as realistic sometimes. It can. And also, you know, there's a lot of great foam latex artists and stuff out there that can make this look really good on somebody's skin. But silicone, although it may look better, it is so heavy. So I would never do a big like forehead piece like that out of silicone. It's going to drag their face down. And when they, you know, nothing's really going to come off with too much sweat, but it can start peeling and different things. Weather is also a factor. If we're doing prosthetic transfers, like when somebody has just scars, and so I just slap on basically a peel and stick sort of scar on them, and I blend it on the edges. It's made out of prosade, which doesn't like to work when it's cold. It doesn't stick anymore. So if there's really cold weather, and all these things factor in. So
a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different scenarios that call for the right materials. And you know, so you're saying you swap. So if you're doing an action scene, you know, where there's a lot of quick cuts and the actor needs to be moving quickly, that's a situation where you might use the latex foam. And then for sort of more close-up shots that are in more detail, that are gonna, you know, the shot's gonna stay on a person longer, that's an opportunity to use something that is a little bit more detailed. Maybe the silicone's a bit heavier.
Yeah, I would like silicone and stuff for some of those things. But I mean, foam latex can look really good. Like if I believe, I don't want to say for sure, but I think Porn Effects, I believe it was foam latex that they used for Eddie Murphy on Coming to America too. I believe. Maybe it could be silicone, but that says a lot that, you know, their game is up there. They're really good at making anything look really good.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure earlier when you were talking about the casting, were you saying live cast or life cast?
Life cast. I have an example real quick, just a second.
She has everything.
So here's one of my favorite actors that I like to use.
Nice.
He is a big guy, and this thing is super heavy, but it's supposed to be more fragile, but it's I made it really durable. I also interlaid burlap within the layers of doing this. So yeah, just yesterday, we had a producer come over. I had my stuff displayed, asking her about something. She wanted a big character, a big monster. And then we said, okay, even with COVID and whatnot, like we don't really feel like live casting a lot of people, you know, because it's only their nose explodes and we have to get all up in there. And it can be expensive. And I was like, well, that adds to the budget. Who do you want? Because we got a life cast. And she said, oh, it's going to be a big guy. I said, I have a big guy. It's this guy. I was like, life cast done. Let's get started. I'm off to work right away sculpting.
And that dude gets
like I said, actors, If you're ever interested in sci-fi, fantasy, or anything, pay to get life casted. It's not always just headshots. You also want to know that you guys can withstand and are good in makeup, especially effects makeup. So that can expand your jobs a lot more. If you get an effects artist to work on you with big, crazy effects, I'm always going to pick that actor over an actor that could be just as good but has never been in effects. I would then tell the director, like, no, choose that person, because I want them to sit in the chair, be quiet, and while I get all this work done and not complain too much, as uncomfortable as it can be. I just want to know that that person can do it.
So I love all the stuff that I'm seeing. I'm like a huge sci-fi horror nerd. I've got my Dawn of the Dead poster in the back. I grew up watching all the John Carpenter things, like The Thing, everyone it like has, and The Thing specifically, there's effects that are kind of puppets. I wonder if you've had any experience working with things that kind of cross that line where it's, the thing is kind of on a person, but then it separates.
Yeah, like the trans, what's it called? Body horror. Body horror, sort of like, like The Fly and things like that. That's my
Cronenberg,
and that's huge budget sometimes, and I'm like, the only thing stopping me is someone hasn't told me or given me the money to get the materials to do it. That's the only thing stopping me. I don't care what it is, but I don't have experience doing it, but I could definitely understand how I would go about building it. Special effects is also such a small community. Never piss off effects artists, especially that are like professionals. We talk, we tell each other. And that's a really good point to even point out, because even on The Thing, that effects artist, he was really great and he's really good, got sick, maybe they wanted to replace him or whatever. He had other friends, Rick Baker and all of them, a lot of people helped do it, and they told them he could get the credit for it, but they wanted to help out. Now, had he not liked those directors or whatever, he could have just left. They couldn't have gotten that help. The whole movie centered around those effects. What are you going to do? Because the effects artists can own all of their products, so they can take it. Oh, you don't want this right now, and you make them mad on set. They kind of can just take their prosthetics, and you got to start over. That's the end of the day. What are you going to do then? Now, we have a professionalism that we wouldn't do that, but we do talk and we do help each other out, and a lot of us all know each other. And even though I'm starting off, I'm starting to know a lot more and bigger names with a lot of things helping out. So sometimes you get one beginner and as a professional, and they can bleed on some other really big effects artists. And you're like, oh, I was a fan of that person's work, and then we're all here as a team doing something. So that would definitely be a team effort project, and I would love to do that.
Brilliant. All right, I want to keep an eye on time a little bit, and I have a couple of questions. And obviously, if there's anyone else has questions, for sure, just jump in. But I want to know if there's any project that you're working on now or getting ready to work on that you're super excited about, or if there's any kind of project that you would specifically want to work on, either a property or a series or something like that. Either or, like, is there something that's cooking right now that you're excited about?
Right now, it's in a lot of independent ones, a lot of Black filmmakers, and I get really excited about that. I've worked with basically every race of people, except so far I haven't worked with anyone Asian. And so, I'm trying to see and expand like different ways. But right now, honestly, I am excited. This alien that I had made that is at the end of my bio is like blue. That director or that producer liked it so much, he then went and he pitched with just that. He barely had enough for just that. And then he went ahead and then got a bigger budget because they liked that design so much. They said, do 3 more. And I was like, yeah, I loved it.
Oh, awesome. Does anyone else have any last questions or comments or things that they're excited about or would want to share? I know Vanessa had her information on the end of the slide deck. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask afterwards or be in touch with her, definitely check it out. And she says she's very excited to work with anyone who's interested and who has passion. But yeah, does anyone else have any questions that they want to add? Yes.
I just had one last question. You mentioned earlier about instead of live casting, you would like take a 3D picture of the person. Can you talk more about that? And I guess if you've ever done the 3D picture process, or like how would you go about that?
I'm about to. It's very expensive, and I obviously don't have all that, but it's basically a room lined with a bunch of cameras, snaps a photo of you all 360, and then the computer will 3D print it all out. And I can't really say too much about it, but as of Monday, I will be doing that. So I will figure that out, and I'll get back to you. Everybody can message me, and sometimes I'll just give out my phone number, and I like to call and talk about these things. So if anyone else has questions, I am available. Blow me up. It's totally fine.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, excuse me. I just wanted to right quick. I know earlier you were talking about the changes with COVID and stuff like that. Just curious if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we have to be the most sanitary person on set. All makeup artists, hair artists, anybody who is really touching the actor. So I make sure that I just bought a whole new set of brushes, mainly for effects, to where I could swap out and just like, I buy really cheap brushes sometimes if it's effects because they get destroyed. Toss them out. I just won't reuse them again. I won't save them from the glue or whatever. I just throw it away because I don't care about it anymore. I wear a face mask, face shield. I get COVID tested before a shoot, and then I quarantine until the shoot date. The only time I'm out of the house is when I'm actually there. And then I wear gloves and I sanitize every time I change gloves. You always have to see them changing the gloves all the time after they touch somebody else. Money, especially their phone. Tell them to put their phone on the table and don't touch it. Phones are disgusting, full of all sorts of germs. You see them on their phone and then they're about to touch your face, stop them. We take our phones to the bathroom and drop it on the floor and we don't think to sanitize it. I mean, think about it.
Don't remind me. Oh. Well, wonderful. I'm excited to get the chance to know you a little bit more, Veniesa. I'm so excited that you're so willing to engage with folks, and looking forward to, definitely also share with us things that you're doing.
Yeah.
I know personally that there are people who I definitely want to connect you with, both who are within the fellowship and external to it. I look forward to maybe working with you on a project related to what we were talking before about, maybe bringing you up here to work on a project that could be really exciting.
Yeah.
But having you out there, knowing that you're there, I think is an inspiration to everybody. So I want to thank you for taking your time to do this. And it's not the end, it's just the beginning. So very excited. Thank you, Vanessa Dillon.
Yes, this is so great. And we're building just a nice Black ecosystem of creatives.
Yeah.
So yes, and we'll be back April the 23rd with Ebony Adams.
And thank you, Veniesa. Appreciate you.
Thank you.